school bullies dared each other to trip a marching royal guard, thinking he'd just be another helpless victim. But when one boy actually tried it, the guard's response wasn't just unexpected, it changed the arrogant teenager forever. Here's what happened when ceremony gave way to a lesson none of them would forget. But before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow at this very same time we're dropping another powerful Royal Guard story that you won't want to miss. They say the Royal Guards can stand so still that birds mistake them for statues, that their discipline is so legendary they wouldn't flinch if a bomb went off, that the perfect stoicism of their faces is maintained even when tourists do their absolute worst to crack them. For generations, visitors from around the world have tried and failed to provoke a reaction from these elite soldiers in their iconic scarlet tunics and bearskin caps. But on this particular Tuesday morning, as sunlight bathed the palace courtyard and tourists gathered with their cameras poised, no one could have predicted that the greatest test to a guard's legendary composure would come from a 16-year-old boy with something to prove and absolutely no idea what he was about to face. The peaceful atmosphere shattered with the arrival of 34 teenagers in navy blue blazers, their voices carrying across the courtyard with the subtlety of a foghorn. St. Bartholomew's Academy, prestigious on paper, problematic in practice, had arrived for their annual history excursion. "Class, please gather round and lower your voices." Miss Bennet's attempt at authority was drowned by the cacophony of adolescent energy. At 28, her 4 years of teaching hadn't prepared her for managing the particularly challenging combination of privilege and rebellion that characterized St. Bartholomew's upper-year students. "Why are we even here? To see some guys in stupid hats stand around?" Jason Harrington's voice cut through the chatter, deliberately loud enough for the nearest tourists to hear. His designer shoes, worth more than Ms. Bennet's monthly salary, scuffed carelessly against the historic stones as he slouched, hands thrust deep in his pockets. "The Queen's Guard represents over 300 years of military tradition," offered Oliver Parker, adjusting his glasses. Despite being the frequent target of Jason's mockery, Oliver's passion for history remained undimmed. "They're active-duty soldiers who... active-duty mannequins, more like," Jason snorted, earning appreciative laughter from his entourage, "standing around like furniture with feathers on their heads." Miss Bennet stepped between them, her teacher's instinct sensing the brewing conflict. "That's enough, Jason. We're guests here, and I expect you to conduct yourself accordingly." As the guards marched into position, their synchronized movements a testament to countless hours of drill practice, Jason began his performance for his friends. He pulled his blazer tight, exaggerated his posture to a ridiculous degree, and goose-stepped in a crude imitation. "Look at me! I'm a Royal Guard," he announced, puffing out his chest. "I spent 3 hours ironing my uniform just to stand in the hot sun while pigeons used me as target practice." A circle of his classmates erupted in laughter, phones raised to capture his antics. The nearest guard remained perfectly stoic, eyes fixed forward as he had been trained, though a nearly imperceptible tightening of his jaw might have been detected by the most observant onlooker. "Jason, stop that immediately," Ms. Bennet hissed, moving quickly to intervene. "That is extremely disrespectful." "Come on, Ms. B," Jason protested, rolling his eyes. "It's just a bit of fun. They're literally paid to stand there and be photographed. We're just giving the tourists what they want, a show." Oliver stepped forward, his normally soft voice carrying an unusual edge. "Actually, these soldiers have all completed operational tours of duty. Most have served in Afghanistan, Iraq, or other combat zones. The ceremonial duty is only a small part of—" "Nobody asked you, Parker," one of Jason's friends cut in. "Why don't you go polish their boots while you're at it?" A family with young children moved away, the parents shooting disapproving glances at the school group. Other tourists began to whisper among themselves, their faces reflecting a mixture of embarrassment and indignation on behalf of the guards. Look, even their hats are ridiculous, Jason continued, warming to his performance as the centre of attention. What poor animal died to make that thing? Is that why they look so miserable? Guilt over the bear genocide. The changing of the guard ceremony continued, the precise movements of the soldiers creating a living tableau of discipline and tradition. For most visitors, it was a moment of connection with centuries of history, but for Jason Harrington it was just another opportunity to perform. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, stepping away from his school group and addressing nearby tourists as if he were an official guide. "Welcome to the Royal Puppet Show, where grown men dress up in doll costumes and pretend they're important. Marvel at their ability to ignore basic human needs like scratching, blinking, or acknowledging reality." "Jason," Miss Bennet grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "That is absolutely enough. One more word and you're waiting on the bus." Several tourists turned away in disgust, shielding their children from the disruptive teenager. A Japanese family who had travelled thousands of miles to witness this ceremony moved further down the viewing area, their disappointed expressions requiring no translation. Oliver closed his notebook with a sharp snap. "They absolutely can hear you. They're trained soldiers, not statues. They maintain composure because of discipline, not because they're unaware." "Ooh, discipline," Jason mocked, wiggling his fingers. "Is that what we're calling it now? Where I'm from, we call it being whipped. Look at them marching like robots. Left, right, left, right." He began an exaggerated march, knees lifting absurdly high. 3 of his friends joined in, forming an impromptu mockery of the ceremonial march. Their blazers dishevelled, ties loosened, they paraded in a circle, making childish sound effects with each step. "Stop this at once," Ms. Bennet's teacher voice cut through their performance. "You are representing St. Bartholomew's Academy and dishonouring yourselves with this behaviour." "Come on, Ms. B. Even you have to admit this whole thing is ridiculous. It's the 21st century and we're watching guys with feather dusters on their heads pretend it's still 1700. That's enough!" Miss Bennet's patience had reached its limit. "One more word, Jason, and you'll not only be waiting on the bus, but you'll also be explaining to your father why you've been suspended from the lacrosse finals." The threat of athletic suspension finally penetrated Jason's armour of arrogance. Lacrosse was his ticket to university. Even his father's generous donations couldn't overcome a disciplinary suspension when recruitment scouts were concerned. He retreated to the periphery of the group, momentarily subdued but still simmering with restless energy. His friends gathered around him, their hushed conversation punctuated by sideways glances at the guards. With the ceremony progressing to its next phase, the guards began their precisely timed march across the courtyard. Their polished boots moved in perfect unison, creating a rhythmic cadence against the ancient stones. For the respectful observers, it was mesmerizing. For Jason Harrington, it was an opportunity. "Hey," whispered Ryan, the lankiest of Jason's entourage, sliding up beside him with a mischievous glint in his eye. "Bet you can't make one of them react." Jason's eyebrows rose with interest. "What kind of bet are we talking about?" "£10 says you can't get one to even look at you," offered another friend, already reaching for his wallet. "Make it 20. Added a third, the growing sum sparking competitive fire in Jason's eyes. "You're on," Jason nodded, mentally calculating the challenge. "But let's make it interesting. £50 total says I can do more than make him look. I bet I can make him break formation completely." The boys exchanged gleeful glances, pooling their money together. £50 was collected, a trivial sum to these privileged teenagers, but the real currency was status and daring, not the cash itself. "What exactly are you planning?" Ryan asked, voice dropping lower as Ms. Bennet glanced in their direction suspiciously. Jason's eyes tracked the guards' marching pattern, studying their timing with unexpected focus. "These guys march like they're on rails, right? Same path, same speed, every time. All I need to do is be in the right place at the right moment." He mimed a casual bumping motion. "You're going to touch a guard?" One of the boys looked genuinely alarmed. That's not just getting kicked out, that's like actual trouble. Not touch, Jason corrected with exaggerated patience. I'm just going to accidentally be checking my phone and step into his path at the last second. If he's so perfectly trained, he should be able to avoid me, right? His smirk suggested he was counting on precisely the opposite outcome. Oliver, who had been keeping a careful distance since the earlier confrontation, had nevertheless overheard enough to piece together their plan. He approached with visible concern. Jason, interfering with the guards is actually an offence. They're not just ceremonial figures. They're active duty soldiers performing an official function. You could face serious consequences. Look who's appointed himself palace security, Jason mocked, turning to his friends. Better hide the plans, boys. Oliver's going to call in the Queen's secret police. Miss Bennet, noticing the huddle and Oliver's concerned expression, made her way over. What's happening here? Jason, I hope you're not planning something that will make me regret not sending you back to the bus already. Just discussing history, Ms. B, Jason replied with practiced innocence. Oliver was just explaining how these guards are the real deal, real soldiers with real training, very impressive stuff. The Royal Guard's marching formation moved with clockwork precision across the courtyard, their route as predictable as it was impressive. Jason watched intently, noting how the lead guard's boots hit the same stones with each pass, how many seconds it took them to complete each segment of their patrol. His focus would have impressed his teachers had it ever been applied to his studies. Wait for it, he muttered to his friends, who had positioned themselves strategically to capture different angles of his impending stunt on their phones. When they make the next turn, I'll be checking my phone and just happen to step out at the perfect moment. The guards were approaching their turning point, rifles held at precisely the same angle, eyes fixed forward with unyielding discipline. Jason began his calculated performance, pretending to be absorbed in his phone, gradually drifting toward the ceremonial route while appearing oblivious to his surroundings. Oliver, recognizing the imminent collision course, moved with unexpected speed. Jason, don't, he called out, no longer caring about drawing attention. This isn't a joke. Miss Bennet's head snapped up at Oliver's urgent tone, her eyes widening as she registered Jason's position and trajectory. Jason Harrington, stop right there, she commanded, already moving toward him with alarm written across her face. But Jason was committed to his course. As the lead guard executed the precise 90-degree turn that would bring him directly along Jason's path, the teenager made his move. He took 2 calculated steps forward, timing his distracted walk to intersect perfectly with the guard's march. What Jason hadn't accounted for was the guard's extensive training. These weren't merely ceremonial figures, but combat veterans whose situational awareness had been honed in environments where such awareness meant the difference between life and death. The guard had registered Jason's approach from his peripheral vision seconds earlier, categorized him as a potential interference, and made microscopic adjustments to his march that would be imperceptible to untrained observers. As Jason made his final step, intending to force the guard to either stop or collide with him, he found himself stepping into empty space where a soldier should have been. The guard's minuscule timing adjustment had placed him exactly 3 inches ahead of where Jason had calculated, causing the teenager to overbalance as his planted foot found no resistance. The laws of physics took over with merciless precision. Jason, committed to his forward momentum and finding nothing to stop against, stumbled awkwardly into empty air where the guard should have been. His expression shifted from smug certainty to panicked realization in a split second that his own friends would later describe as priceless. His phone, the latest model that his father had purchased upon release, flew from his hand, skittering across the ancient stones with an expensive-sounding crack. His arms windmilled comically as he fought to regain his balance, his body betraying every desperate attempt at recovery. His designer shoes, chosen for style rather than stability, with leather soles polished to a mirror shine, slid across the smooth courtyard stones like a novice ice skater hitting the rink for the first time. He went down hard, sprawling unceremoniously on the ground as the guard continued his perfect march, not so much as glancing at the fallen teenager. The formation continued unbroken, their discipline uncompromised, while Jason lay in an undignified heap directly in front of dozens of tourists and, worse, his entire school group. The courtyard fell silent for one perfect moment before reactions set in. First came the shocked gasps, then the inevitable laughter, not from the respectful tourists, but from Jason's own friends. The same boys who had encouraged his stunt now howled with delight at his humiliation, their phones capturing every moment of his downfall. Did you see that? He completely ate it. The guard didn't even look at him. Jason pushed himself up, his face burning with humiliation turned quickly to anger. His expensive blazer was smudged with dirt, his ego bruised far more severely than his body. "He pushed me," Jason declared loudly, desperately trying to salvage his dignity. "Did you see that? He deliberately made me fall." But no one was buying it. The tourists who had witnessed the entire scene shook their heads in disapproval or turned away in second-hand embarrassment. Even some of his classmates were muttering that he'd gone too far. "That's quite enough!" Ms. Bennett's voice cut through the chaos as she reached Jason's side. Her expression had transformed from teacher concern to cold fury. "Get up, Mr. Harrington, now!" Jason scrambled to his feet, brushing off his uniform with exaggerated motions. "Did you see what he did to me? He deliberately—" "What I saw," Ms. Bennett interrupted, her voice low but sharp enough to silence him, "was you deliberately attempting to interfere with a ceremonial guard, failing spectacularly, and now attempting to blame others for your own foolishness." A palace security officer approached, his demeanor professional but stern. "Is there a problem here?" Before Ms. Bennett could respond, Jason launched into his defense. "That guard deliberately made me fall. I was just walking and he changed direction right into my path. I could sue for assault." The security officer's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes suggested he had dealt with similar situations many times before. "Young man, the guard's marching routes are clearly marked and have remained unchanged for generations. CCTV covers the entire ceremonial area." He gestured discreetly to cameras positioned around the courtyard. "Would you like to reconsider your statement?" The blood drained from Jason's face as the implications sank in. His eyes darted to the cameras, then back to the officer. The palace had video evidence of his attempted prank. "I might have misjudged the situation," he muttered, his former confidence evaporating. Ms. Bennett stepped forward, her professional demeanor firmly back in place. "Officer, I sincerely apologize for my student's behavior. I can assure you that St. Bartholomew's Academy does not condone such disrespect, and there will be significant consequences." His sentence remained unfinished as the guards completed their ceremonial circuit and returned to their positions. The lead guard, the one Jason had attempted to trip, executed a perfect halt, then, to the astonishment of everyone present, broke from his position. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. The Queen's Guard breaking protocol was so rare that many tourists instinctively raised their phones to capture the unexpected moment. "Oh no," Oliver whispered, recognizing the significance of what was happening. "This is serious." The guard approached with measured steps, each movement precise and deliberate. His face remained composed, but there was nothing ceremonial about his bearing now. This was pure military authority, focused entirely on Jason Harrington. The guard came to a halt, precisely 3 feet from Jason, his posture ramrod straight, his presence commanding absolute attention without a single word. For several seconds he simply stood there, allowing the weight of the moment to settle on the teenager who had so casually attempted to disrupt centuries of tradition. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority that needed no volume to command respect. "Guardsman First Class David Mitchell, formerly of the 1st Battalion, sir. Afghanistan, 2 tours. Iraq, 1 tour. 6 years of active combat service before my current posting. The introduction hung in the air. Simple facts delivered without emotion, yet carrying immense weight. The contrast between the guard's distinguished service record and Jason's childish prank couldn't have been more stark. The ceremonial duties you've been mocking, young man, are performed by soldiers who have proven themselves in combat situations most civilians cannot imagine. His eyes, which had maintained the 1,000-yard stare of ceremonial duty just minutes before, now focused directly on Jason with laser intensity. The change was subtle but profound, like watching a statue come to life, revealing the human warrior beneath the ceremonial facade. "I've pulled wounded comrades from burning vehicles under enemy fire," he continued, his voice level but carrying enough power to reach every student present. "I've made split-second decisions that determined whether people lived or died. The men standing guard today have parachuted into hostile territory, trudged through snow-covered mountains tracking terrorists, and stood shoulder to shoulder with allies in the worst conditions imaginable. Every guard on this parade ground has earned their position through service, discipline, and sacrifice, not as a demotion or ceremonial retirement, but as an honor reflecting exemplary military service." Jason shifted uncomfortably, his usual arsenal of witty comebacks deserting him entirely. Behind him, his friends had lowered their phones, the atmosphere too heavy now for social media posturing. "This uniform," the guard continued, gesturing to his immaculate scarlet tunic, "is not a costume. It's a symbol of over 3 centuries of service to the crown. The precision you mocked, that's the same discipline that keeps soldiers alive in combat zones. The stoicism you ridiculed, that's the self-control that allows us to function under fire. When you attempted to interfere with my duty, you weren't just trying to embarrass one soldier. You were disrespecting every man and woman who has worn this uniform, many of whom gave their lives in service." The guard's voice remained measured, but carried an undercurrent of steel that held everyone's attention. "The bearskin cap you mocked? It's worn to honor the defeat of Napoleon's Imperial Guard at Waterloo, where men fighting under our colors died to protect the freedoms you enjoy today." The guard shifted his attention to the wider school group, his gaze sweeping over them with the same intensity. History isn't just something you read in books or see in museums. It's alive in traditions like this. When you stand here, you're connecting with generations of service and sacrifice that stretch back through time. He returned his focus to Jason, who seemed to shrink under the direct attention. Now, technically, attempting to interfere with a guard on duty is an offence that can result in arrest. The fact that you're wearing a school uniform tells me you're here to learn. I'm sorry, Jason managed, his voice uncharacteristically small. "I didn't think about it that way." "That's precisely the problem," the guard responded, not unkindly. "You didn't think. You saw the uniform, the ceremony, the tradition, and considered it something to mock rather than something to understand." He turned slightly, addressing Ms. Bennett now. "Ma'am, with your permission, I'd like to offer your students something we don't usually provide, context for what they're witnessing today." The guard proceeded to explain the history and significance of the ceremony with military precision and surprising eloquence. He spoke of battles fought, traditions maintained, the brotherhood of service that connected modern guards with their historical predecessors. He explained how the precision they witnessed wasn't mere pageantry, but a reflection of the discipline that kept soldiers alive in combat. As he spoke, the students, even Jason's friends, began to listen, really listen, their phones forgotten, their attention captured, not by spectacle, but by the genuine passion and pride in the guardsman's words. "The ceremonial duties we perform here," he concluded, "are just one aspect of our service. When I'm not standing guard at this palace, I'm training, deploying, or preparing to defend the same values that these ceremonies represent. Remember that the next time you're tempted to see tradition as something outdated, rather than something worthy of respect." The courtyard had grown quiet. tourists and students alike absorbing the guardsman's words. The afternoon sun caught his brass buttons, casting reflections that seemed to underscore the weight of tradition he represented. Jason stood with his head slightly bowed, the arrogant posture of earlier completely abandoned. "I didn't know," he finally said, genuine regret evident in his voice. "About the combat service, about what the uniform really means." He looked up, meeting the guard's steady gaze. "I just thought... I don't know what I thought." "That's often the way with disrespect," Guardsman Mitchell responded, his tone softening slightly. "It usually comes from misunderstanding rather than malice." Oliver stepped forward, his earlier nervousness replaced by academic enthusiasm. "The Queen's Guard selection process is actually one of the most rigorous in the military, isn't it? Only soldiers who've already proven themselves in active service are considered." "Our day begins at 4 a.m., the guard explained, with several hours of preparation. Each uniform element must meet exacting standards, not for show, but because attention to detail is a military discipline that translates to battlefield awareness. The bearskin caps alone weigh 1.5 kilograms, and we stand at attention for shifts that can last 2 hours without movement, regardless of weather conditions." Jason's friends exchanged glances, clearly recalculating their previously dismissive attitudes. One of them whispered audibly, 2 hours without moving? In full gear? I can't even sit through a single class without fidgeting." For the first time, a slight smile softened the guard's disciplined features. "You know, when I was about your age, before I joined up, I probably wouldn't have understood all this either. The meaning of traditions, ceremonies, protocols, they're not always obvious until you've experienced why they matter." "I think," Ms. Bennett said, stepping forward, "we owe Guardsman Mitchell both an apology and our gratitude. He's given us a perspective on tradition and service that goes well beyond our planned curriculum today." She turned to Jason, raising an eyebrow expectantly. The teenager, his usual bravado notably absent, stepped forward with uncharacteristic humility. "I'm sorry for disrespecting you and what you stand for," he said, the words coming slowly but sincerely. "And for trying to interfere with your duty. I didn't understand what any of this really meant." He hesitated, then added, "Thank you for explaining instead of just having me thrown out." Guardsman Mitchell nodded once, accepting the apology with military economy. "Education is always preferable to punishment when the opportunity presents itself, though I trust your teacher will ensure today's lesson is properly reinforced." The slight glance toward Ms. Bennett carried clear meaning. "Oh, indeed," she confirmed, her teacher's smile containing just the right blend of appreciation and warning. "I believe an extensive research project on military traditions and their significance seems appropriate, don't you, Jason?" Jason nodded, accepting the academic consequence without his usual complaints. "Yes, ma'am." The palace security officer approached with professional courtesy. "Guardsman Mitchell, if you're satisfied with the resolution, we can consider the matter closed from a security perspective." "I believe these young people have learned something valuable today," the guard affirmed. "No further action necessary." With a crisp nod that served as both farewell and dismissal, Guardsman Mitchell turned and marched back to his post. His movements were identical to those Jason had mocked earlier, but now the students watched with new understanding, seeing not mindless routine, but the physical embodiment of military precision and discipline. As the school group departed, Oliver fell into step beside Jason. "You know, the library has some fascinating books on military traditions, if you need help with that research project," he offered, without a trace of condescension. To everyone's surprise, Jason nodded thoughtfully. "I might take you up on that, Parker," he said quietly. "Seems like there's more to this history stuff than I thought." Ms. Bennett watched the interaction with quiet satisfaction. In her years of teaching, she'd witnessed countless field trips, but few had delivered such a powerful lesson. The palace grounds grew smaller behind them as they walked back toward their waiting bus, but something significant had changed within the group. The rowdy, Disrespectful teenagers who had arrived were departing with a newfound sense of respect, not forced upon them by rules or authority, but awakened through understanding. In the distance, Guardsman Mitchell resumed his post, his posture once again ceremonial perfection, his gaze fixed forward as tradition demanded. To tourists arriving just now, he would appear identical to every other guard on duty, another perfectly disciplined soldier performing a centuries-old ritual. But to 34 students from St. Bartholomew's Academy, he would forever be remembered as the man who taught them that behind every tradition stands something worth respecting, and behind every uniform stands a person worth knowing. What would you have done in Guardsman Mitchell's position? Would you have shown the same patience and used the moment as a teaching opportunity, or would you have preferred stricter consequences for such disrespect? And have you ever misjudged someone based on appearances, only to discover the depth of experience and knowledge behind their role? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you appreciated this story about respect for tradition and service, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories. Press the bell icon to get notified when we upload new content. Our previous Royal Guard stories are appearing on screen now if you'd like to continue exploring these powerful moments of respect and dignity. We'll see you again with another story tomorrow, same time.